evening to all of you. Good evening to everyone. Welcome to the 48th Leadership Levers lecture by Abhinav Bindra. Thank you all for joining this exciting session as we have Mr. Bindra delivering his Leadership Levers lecture in a 5-star chat with TimesPro CEO on a fine Saturday evening. While there is so much to talk about Mr. Abhinav Bindra's glorious career, let me share with you a few of his exemplary career milestones. Trust me, each one of them has endeared him to scores of Indians across generations. Mr. Bindra's journey to becoming the first Indian to win an Olympic individual gold medal and the first Indian to win the World Championship gold in air rifle shooting is an example of single-minded quest for perfection. His victory at Beijing Olympics was not just a personal one, but it also broke a sporting barrier that had haunted a nation for a century. Born in Delta Dune, he has won over 150 individual medals in a career that lasted over 20 years. His last Olympics were in Rio in 2016, where he finished fourth. Recipient of the Arjun Award, the youngest recipient of the Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna Award, Mr. Bindra also was conferred with India's third highest civilian award, the Padma Bhushan, in 2009. He was also conferred with the title of Honorary Lieutenant Colonel in the Territorial Army. For his exceptional service to the sport, he was awarded the Blue Cross in 2018 by the International Shooting Sports Federation, which is the ISF's highest honor. Mr. Bindra chaired the ISSF Athletes Committee for 80 years and currently a member of the International Olympic Committee's Athlete Commission and Education Commission. Post his retirement from the active sports, he founded the Abhinav Bindra Targeting Performance Centers, which are state-of-the-art performance and medical rehabilitation facilities. He has also established the Abhinav Bindra Foundation Trust, ABFT, a non-profit organization to support Indian grassroots athletes across various sporting disciplines by imbibing cutting-edge sports science technology. Through the verticals of high-performance training intervention, education, and social upliftment, the ABFT aims to bring global best practice to the Indian sporting landscape, not only supporting what currently exists as a protocol in sport, but also making it more accountable, expert-driven, and locally contextualized. Mr. Bindra is championing the cause of Olympism and its values with the aim of building more peaceful and inclusive society by leveraging the power of sport. It is his belief that as a society, we need to imbibe the Olympic spirit in our daily lives and promote the ideas, values, and vision for acceptance, human rights, and non-discrimination. Let me also have the pleasure of introducing the Chief Architect of Leadership Levers Lecture Series and TimesPro CEO, Mr. Anish Krishna, who shall be engaging Abhinav on a few interesting questions that would present Abhinav's deep-rooted personality and philosophy. Mr. Anish Sri Krishna is a graduate of Asian Institute of Management, Manila, Philippines, and is also a member of the governing body of Bennett University. He took over as the CEO of TimesPro in 2015, and since then, he has led the rapid growth and scaling of the company in higher education. Over to you, Anish.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Chaudhary. I think, we should look at background noise. There's a little bit of background noise. So I'd request the IT people to try and control that. Thank you once again, Dr. Chaudhary. On behalf of TimesPro, our students and staff, a big thank you to Mr. Abhinav Bindra for gracing our Leadership Levers lecture with your presence. Abhinav, as a management professional, an educator, and quite simply as a fan, it is a thrilling moment for me to meet and to be able to talk with someone who has truly scaled the pinnacle of achievement in your chosen field. Thank you so much for your time for this session. Thank you profusely for being an icon and a true north to every Indian who seeks to excel in their fields. I'm sure our audience, comprising of TimesPro's students, TimesPro's staff, and a lot of people who are interested in excellence, will be waiting with bated breath to hear what you have to say. Abhinav, I had the pleasure of reading your wonderfully written autobiography. I think it's one of the most beautiful and most easy reads that we have seen, and it's beautifully written, a shortened history, and it chronicles your journey, and it's a journey of as much blood and sweat as it has been of love and support. And I think it's a wonderful read for any person looking to excel. So while there are many questions that come to mind as one goes through the book, and I will probably spend many hours trying to get to your true north. I've tried to put these questions into three broad segments. So with your permission, I'm looking at the gold moment, the moment that you would have considered as your pinnacle. Uh, Talking a little bit about the sports culture in India and the culture around shooting, and finally around resilient leadership, which is really a topic that is close to my heart and to the hearts of many of the people around us in this webinar. So, with your permission, Abhinav, on those lines, I would commence this conversation.
Sure.
So,
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and look forward to this conversation.
thank you so much, Abhinav. Really graceful of you to be here and to spare your valuable time. Yeah. So the first topic, the first segment of conversation would be around the gold itself, Abhinav. I went through the book, and it provides some fascinating glimpses of your early childhood and how you were attracted to shooting, and how it was so, uh, you know, aligned to your own personality and your early attitudes to sport and to life. How your period with Rana Gurmeet Sodhi led to the spotting of that rare shooting talent, and how you went on to train under Lieutenant Colonel Dhillon. And the book talks about the many thousands of hours of training that you had under a mango tree. Such an interesting topic. Would you care to describe your initial days of getting baptized into the sport, please?
Well, to be very honest, I had a very reluctant start into sport. As a young boy, I actually hated sport. My only talent really was to miss physical education classes in school. And I came up with the most creative of excuses to miss those. I was studying at the Doon School and wasn't too happy there, so got out of there and was then in a day school in Chandigarh, where I was looking for just a hobby to do after school hours. My parents, my father especially, always pushed me towards sport. Unfortunately, I didn't really listen to him much, at least while at my time in Doon. Bear in mind, at this point of time, I was quite a fat boy who really hated to move. And one fine day, I was introduced to Colonel Dhillon, and I went on my first formal shooting session. And I really fell in love with the sport from day one, because to be somewhat successful in this sport, I just had to stand still, and there was no real running around required. That was the reluctant start into it. Ironically, fitness, which was really not my strength early on, a lot of effort went into it. And at the end of the whole career, the physical side of it actually became my biggest strength. So it was quite ironical. But those days were very interesting. I mean, it was a tough start because, there was not much infrastructure available in the country. As you said, I started shooting under a mango tree. And in fact, to be very honest, Colonel Dhillon did not even want to take me on as one of his trainees. And it was quite tough to get through to him, because he kind of thought I was from a well-to-do family, and his opinion was that people from a well-to-do background do not have the ability to work hard. So I wrote a letter to him as a 12-year-old boy, because Rana Sodhi's attempts to get through to him didn't really succeed. So I said, now I have to give it a try. So I wrote a letter to him saying that, I promise you that I will give this my fullest commitment, at least give me a chance. I wasn't the most talented athlete. As I said, I was this fat boy who had no coordination, who had no athleticism or competitiveness. But funnily enough, the real talent I really had was my ability to work hard. And frankly, from day one, the day I was introduced to Colonel Dhillon, and till the very end of my shooting career, it was all about hard work. It was about it became a journey where I wanted to be the best that I could be. I wanted to always be better than what I was yesterday. It was, as a young boy, of course, motivation was different. As a young 12 or 13-year-old boy, I wanted to become famous. And Colonel Dhillon really did a good job in tempting me with fame and said that, if I won a little local competition and my name would come in the newspaper, and for a 12-year-old boy, those type of things were pretty irresistible. But funnily enough, the whole journey towards fame was short-lived, and then motivations kept changing. And really, what really endured through the 22 years of my sporting career, from the day of Colonel Dhillon to my last shot at the Olympic Games, was the love and passion for the process of the sport. I really loved shooting, and that was what really kind of maintained a childlike enthusiasm from the day one when I went to Colonel Dhillon till the day I shot that last shot at Rio. So that was something which was always a constant, that passion for the sport, the passion for the process of executing my skill.
Amazing. I think it's almost like having you read out many portions of the book. There's so much life in it. There's so much of humility in the way you narrate your initial journey, and it's truly said that the true north will come to you if you have the inclination, if you have the patience, and if you have the sheer grit to go through it. You rightly said, being a boy from a well-to-do family, being a boy from a well looked after parenthood and so on, would normally have given you some advantages, but in your case, you actually had to fight it and you had to overcome it.
If I could just interrupt before you get to the next question. Yes, there were, of course, advantages that, I was materially supported. But when you also come from an somewhat reasonably well-to-do family, you always have options. You have options to do something else. And that was also challenging, because a sports career is all about failure. And when you have an option B available to you, it also requires discipline and persistence to stay true to your dreams and stay true to what you've set out to do. So that was also a challenge which I had to face. I had to constantly make sure that I had that fire in my belly to be the best in the world. And that is something money can't buy. It has to come from deep within.
Absolutely, and that's a lesson that I think a lot of our students would do well to imbibe, because in India, any vocation that you choose, and we talk about education being the best way to get into your chosen vocation, but every vocation is tough, and we talk about how it takes a village to raise a child, and it probably creates it takes an entire town to raise a champion sportsman. So tell us a little bit about how your early childhood, your parents, your mom, your dad, their influence on you, and how they shaped your thinking and your progress through, I'm sure, a lot of frustrations into finally getting into your medal.
Yeah, so I think my parents and my family, my sister, I think they were my greatest inspiration, my parents especially. And I'll tell you a little bit about that relationship. Of course, they provided for me materially, and that was most useful. But frankly, for me, their biggest contribution in my sports career was their ability to have belief in their child. On days where I felt hopeless, and there were plenty of such days, they continued to see a lot of hope in me. They remained positive throughout all failures, and there were plenty of them, as I said. They continued to believe in me. So that environment that was created at home was spectacular. A sports career is always about getting out of your comfort zone. And you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone every day. And it's very tough, because pushing yourself out of your comfort zone means that you're going to fall on many days. And whenever I fell down, My family was right there to pick me up again. Their second biggest contribution, I believe, is their ability to just give me complete space. And for me, to be able to make my own mistakes. And looking back at my career, that was something very, very important in my growth as an athlete, my growth as an individual, because I had to learn very early on in my life and in my career that I have to own my successes and I have to own my failures. And that was very, very critical, because in the moment of truth, when I was shooting that last shot at that Olympic final to win a gold medal, I was standing all alone. And, that courage and that determination to be able to do that and take that leap of faith when it really matters. And when you are under the greatest pressure of your life, to be able to and be at your best, that requires a great amount of self-assurance. I won't even use the word self-belief, because I really never had it and I struggled with self-belief. But that courage really comes from deep within. And that courage was really came through this whole journey that I had to navigate for myself. And their ability to give me space and their ability to let me make my own decisions. That I think they always advised me, but they never pushed me saying that, no, this is what you have to do. There were discussions, sometimes there were different points of views, but at the end of the day, it was me I had to take that call, and I, with my coaches and the experts that I was working with, but then I had to learn very early on that I had to take ownership of those decisions.
Well, more power to all of them. I mean, I'm a big supporter of parents who allow their kids to fail, to discover themselves, and to bounce back, and to give them the space to be able to find that resilience in them. And I think that's
what was very failure was very accepted. It was something that was an option, and that is something very important because in life we are going to fail, but what we also have to learn to do is have joy and effort. And then fall in love with the process, and that is very, very important, because if we are only driven with outcomes, that's a very, very slippery slope that you're going to undertake, and that's something that I certainly don't advise anybody.
Fascinating, Abhinav. And one of the other themes that keeps coming up in your book is when you talk about this emotional tussle between the academic, pressures while growing up. And you specifically talk about a friend, mentor, tutor, guide, Mr. Amit Bhattacharjee. How was that relationship as a foil for, the parental umbrella that you had? And how did that help you to sort of find that overall balance in your approach? Was academics an important part of your journey?
It was a very important part. However, it had to be adjusted to the life of an athlete, because my primary focus was to train and to be the best that I could be, but I had to complete my education, and that was something very, very important. My relationship with Amit Bhattacharya really started. He was my physics teacher, and he used to help me post school hours and help me cover up when I was away from school. But that relationship grew because I was able to confide in him. I was able to tell him how I was feeling, and he was somebody who listened without judgment, and that was something which was great. So when I was feeling at my lowest ebb, or when I was because Amit also followed me in competitions later on in my sports career, and when I was feeling nervous or when I had plenty of self-doubts, that I had openness in that relationship to be able to really speak to him and bear my heart out. And that is something which was very, very powerful, because sometimes you're vulnerable, but the biggest mistake you can do is when you're vulnerable is just bottle up and not have the ability to share it with somebody. And that was a relationship which really came through as a young boy, and it I'm still very much in touch with him, and as I am with my other coaches, my relationships is with my coaches, with my support staff. That is really what I look back at my sports career. I don't really look back at my sports career at the medals that I won. It's the relationships that I built with my mom, with my dad, with Amit, with my different coaches, with even competitors. That will stay true to me for the rest of my life. And that is what I look back at that 22 years with fondness. I don't look
And there was
back.
there was this sweet little anecdote about him allowing you to drive his car, and you were what, barely 12 or 13 at the time, and you were driving a Maruti 800 car that belonged to him. So he put himself out there, put his confidence in you. And I thought that was a really good sort of display of the kind of bonding that you had. I thought that was a really sweet part of it.
Yes.
Abhinav, you also spoke about the importance of failure and the importance of learning from it. I think one of the most heartrending moments in your book, and I suspect in your life, was when you shot at Athens. And I noticed that you wrote that you actually thought you were shooting well. And when you saw the results, when you looked at the results were sometimes in the 8s, sometimes in the 9s, and occasionally in the 10s. And I think you stood 7th in that particular event. That was probably the lowest total you've ever shot in your entire shooting career, and that was at one of those really pinnacle events. Besides the aftermath of the failure and all of that, how do you ascribe the role of a seminal event like that in the bounce back and in the eventual conquer that you did? And what lessons do you draw from it? I know you're still a very young man. Many of our students may actually be in the age group that you're in right now. We talk to professionals as students, but you've seen more success and perhaps more stepping stones than most of us have in an entire lifetime. So talk to us about the meaning of failure and how you treat failure and how you deal with it.
Well, I think success in life, and at least success in my sporting career, was about failing well. It was about learning to let go of the unwanted baggage that failure brings, but learn from each event and each experience and move ahead. It is all right to be grumpy and sad and whine about it for a day or two, but then you have to get back on the saddle again and stay true to your goals and persist with them. And that is pretty much what I did in my sports career. Failure teaches you a lot. I think you learn much more from failure than from success. And Athens was a difficult time for me. Yes, I broke an Olympic record on that particular day in the qualifiers, and I entered the final in 3rd place. And frankly, to win a medal on that particular day required me to shoot 10 very ordinary shots. But as you said, I ended up shooting the 10 worst shots of my life. And this was at the grandest stage where I thought I was at my absolute best. A couple of days after this Athens final, they got to know that the floor I was standing on had a loose tile underneath, which reverberated every time I shot. So this was heartbreaking. It was something, out of my control, and I'd worked so hard for years. And at this stage where this is something unexpected comes back. But I went back home, I regrouped. I was grumpy for 2 days, but I regrouped and I said, what am I going to learn from it? And how did it change me in my mindset? The number one thing it changed was that I became from an outcome-driven person, I became a very process-oriented person.
Very important.
And that was a very, very important turning point in my sports career. For me, it was all about preparation. It was about taking every equation out of the book in trying to prepare for an event. One of the first things I did when I got back home from Athens was to install a loose tile in my shoe.
Wow.
So that I'm well prepared for a situation like that. But more importantly, what this failure really did was also taught me detachment, to detach myself from outcomes and really, really focus on that process. And for me, the process became the goal. And I really started finding a lot of joy in the day-to-day. I fell in love with the boring and the mundane. It was about giving myself, doing my best every single day. The Olympics did not come once in 4 years anymore for me. They came every day. And that was the change that I had. And it was all about details. I became a very detailed oriented person. And of course, this detachment was something which was something very, very important
Very, very, very succinctly put. I mean, process over result. I think that's just about the nutshell of everything that we teach in management and in life. I think it's fantastic that you articulated it so nicely. Abhinav, it seems to me that you have been portrayed as this quiet, reclusive, person who doesn't like the limelight, who rather shuns the limelight. Was that by choice? Was it a dedication? Do you have regrets about missing a quote unquote a normal childhood or youth in the extraordinary commitment and dedication that you've displayed in getting to the goal there?
Absolutely not, because those were choices I made. Those were decisions that I took. I don't look back at them as any sort of sacrifices. Those were just my choices. Nobody put a gun on my head to choose that life. It was my own decision, which I owned and which I absolutely am proud of. So absolutely no regrets. Absolutely don't look at them as sacrifices at all. Those were simply choices that I decided to make. The question of shunning the limelight and things like that, when you become detached from the outcome, and when the outcome doesn't really is not the biggest driver anymore, it's hard to fall in love with the limelight, because the limelight is just
is all about the outcome.
Is a consequence of the consequence. So for me, the joy was I found equal joy in effort when I was practicing at home and there were no lights and cameras at me, and when nobody was watching. I'll give you a small story to you, because I think people may relate to stories more. In my introduction, I think you said that Beijing was one of my biggest moments in my career. Yes, the outcome, yes. But if somebody asks me which was the most satisfying day in my sports career, and this most satisfying day in my sports career actually came one training day. It was the 31st of December, very cold at home. And I was in a physical training session, and I had to do 100 sit-ups. And I had this really tough trainer from Australia who was training me. And at count 95, he miscounted and said, "Oh, you did a great job. Well done. We're done for the year. Great job." And I looked back in his eyes and said, "No, I have 5 more to go." And that, I just walked out of that gym that day with so much happiness and so much self-respect. This journey really became a journey of trying to achieve my own self-respect, which then actually became my most powerful weapon, because I was always struggling to gain self-belief, but I had my self-respect, and that was something which was my greatest weapon when I actually did well.
Amazing. I think there's a popular management theory, also a part of a great book by Malcolm Gladwell, talks about the 10,000 hour rule. You want to really get very, very good at something. You do it for 10,000 hours. You probably did a lot more than that. And the fact that you enjoyed the process rather than the outcome is really the embodiment of excellence. And I think it's really, this is a recording of this conversation that I will keep going back to. When I'm faced with some really tough challenge in the business or in general in life. I'll switch gears now, Abhinav, to a little bit about the sports culture that we have in India, the process that we have in India. it's often been compared with the process followed by, say, the Chinese or the Americans. And it is said, and it's popular reading, but it is said that the Chinese invariably have this rigorous program. They identify uh, kids at a very young age, and they put them into a very strong regime and put them into a lifelong regime aimed at the final outcome of getting an Olympic medal. And the US model is a very different model where the access to quality coaching, quality infrastructure is made available to a wide number of kids, and those who do well are taken up. I don't know if we have an India way or an India model to this. I mean, we do have great athletes like you who, through the power of their own will and their own skill, are able to make it to the kind of excellence that you have. But is there an India way that is evolving? You think is there something that we are doing to make things better? And if yes, what's your view on that?
Well, I think number one, we have to find our own way. I think copying another system won't work because we're culturally different. We're different people. We often talk about the fact that we are a 1.3 billion population and we only win a few medals at the Olympic Games. But I think it's very important to ask the question, how many out of the 1.3 billion actually play sport? And when you actually look at that number, we're actually not doing too badly. What we really need to ensure, in my mind, is giving more access to people to just enjoy playing sport. I think that is the foundation of elite level success. We cannot just have a model which is just directed towards elite sport. We need to give access to young people, and we have such a young demographic now, to just play sport for the sheer joy of playing sport, for the health benefits of sport, and more importantly, to imbibe the values of sport. Sport teaches you so many things. It teaches you about winning, but more importantly, it teaches you how to lose. It teaches you honesty. It teaches you integrity. It teaches you how to follow rules. It teaches you things about respect. It teaches you to build relationships. And I think this young demographic can do really well by imbibing these values through the experience of playing sport. They're the global superpower, economic superpowers in the world also happen to be sporting superpowers. And I believe that they've become economic superpowers because sport has played a very important role in the upbringing of their society. The values imbibed as kids through playing sport, they remain with you for the rest of your life. And that really has a huge consequence on in whatever walk of life that you choose and how you're able to perform as an individual. So I think that should be the foundation of what we should be aiming to do. And that when we do that, elite success will be a consequence of that. Of course, we have to provide more facilities, coaching at the grassroots level, science, technology, but that is all possible to do. But we will only meet our aspirations of such a large country of 1.3 billion people should at least be winning 50, 60 Olympic medals at an Olympic Games. That will only happen when more people just play sport for the sheer joy of playing sport. We want to reach a stage where we build a culture of sport in this country, where people for an activity over the weekend choose going and playing sport over going to the movies, for example. When that change happens, that is when we would have really triggered sustainable change, which will help us eventually meet our aspiration of winning these multiple medals. But if we just focus on elite sport, I think that would be a mistake. We would really not be leveraging on the power of sport enough. And really, the power of sport, really what it has is how it can play a meaningful part in shaping society and shaping such a young society. I think sport has a huge role to play.
And very well said. And I think a lot of it is also about how people approach the problem, right? I mean, the way you are approaching the problem is so refreshing. And I think one cannot disagree with your point that, hey, this is not about infrastructure. It's not about just access. It's not about just looking at some elite sports. It's about changing the mindset towards sport, and that will change mindsets toward life and economics and prosperity. And I think that's an amazingly well put point. Abhinav, you yourself are now post your I wouldn't want to say retirement for someone of your age, but you're giving back in many ways to sport in India and to shooting in particular. Talk to us a little bit about your initiatives and what you're doing and how your vision for sports in India over the next couple of decades would be.
Well, my primary outreach to Indian sport is through my foundation, the Abhinav Bindra Foundation, where we work under 3 pillars. The first pillar of our work is intervention, where we support about 80 odd, or now in this year even going to go above 100, about 150 athletes, young athletes between the ages of 12 and 16 primarily, and give them a scholarship called STEAM. So we incorporate science, technology, engineering, analytics, and medicine into their training. And these are athletes from all different disciplines. We have a network of about 15 performance centers, which has a lot of science, it has a lot of technology, a lot of the scientific sports science aspect into our working. And we try and help them build a strong foundation and really leverage on science right from a very young level. The second part of our work under intervention is a project called Sport for Life. It is under this project, we give about 100 free surgeries to athletes who may get injured. And, I'm not talking about the elite level athletes. There are so many athletes in India, who are not famous, but they get an injury and that can be career threatening, and that's the end of it. So we offer this support, and we've built centers of excellences with orthopedic surgeons across the country to be able to help athletes with that. Our third project under intervention is a project which really helps female athletes. We've built a platform which empowers female athletes to be the best that they can be. Female athletes have specific health requirements, require specific mentorship, and that is what we provide under that intervention. The second aspect of our work is under education, because I believe Indian sport can only reach its aspiration if we empower the entire ecosystem that surrounds an Indian athlete. We run a sports medicine and research institute where we started with bachelor's and master's degrees in sports science and physiotherapy to start with. We bring in global best practice with faculty from across the world, expertise from world leaders in these fields. In order to help empower that ecosystem in that manner. The second aspect under education is a leadership program for helping administrators, governance in sport, another area which we've struggled for decades and continue, unfortunately, to struggle. So this is a program we do in partnership with the University of Loughborough and the ELMS Foundation in India, where we have a program for administrators to really help them get access to global best practice and put in high performance environments in sport in India. The third aspect under education is athlete mental health, an area that I have personally worked very closely with the International Olympic Committee on this area, and we're trying to help build psychologically safe environments for athletes to train under. The third pillar of our work, and for me, the most critical and most passionate pillar, is a pillar where we leverage on the power of sport for social good. Here we run the Olympic Value Education Program, currently being piloted in 100 schools in Odisha, in Bhubaneswar and Rourkela, where these are government schools, where kids, about close to 40,000 kids, play sport. For many, playing sport for the first time in their lives. But the real idea behind the program is to imbibe values through playing sport. All these values that I've been talking about in the last few minutes, They play sport, they learn about teamwork, they learn about discipline, they learn about honesty, they learn about integrity, they learn a lot about respect, they learn about excellence, they learn, of course, about friendships. And that is a program which is going really well. And this is what I really believe where the real power of sport really lies, and how it can really help shape young minds and young people. So that is a little bit of an overview of the work that we do.
Terrific, terrific. And education is a subject close to all our hearts at TimesPro. And I think everything we believe starts and ends with education. So again, more power to you. And we'd be very, very interested in furthering this conversation offline on what we can do together to further the cause of sports education. Abhinav, to move on to the final segment of our conversation today, this is about students and tutors. The TimesPro is all about education, and we are particularly focused on management education. And the topic of today's discussion is leadership resilience. So, Abhinav, management thinking identifies resilience is a crucial characteristic for a leader and for a business person. And we live today in the most hyper competitive, some would say a post VUCA kind of world, all sorts of jargons to describe it. But it's just that managing and leading organizations has become more difficult than it has ever been in history. There's technology to deal with. There are people problems. There are environmental problems. So many different disruptive changes happening. From your perspective, given all of what you have seen, in your life thus far, what do you think are the best ways to cultivate resilience? And what would your advice be to business leaders who are dealing with so much of change and so much of turmoil around them? What would be your advice?
I think it'll be a repetition of what I said, but it is important to repeat. I think it is really about, of course, in business, you're after outcomes, and similarly in sport. At the end of the day, I want to go out there and win a gold medal, but those outcomes will only be achieved when there is love for the process, and there's love for the boring and the mundane, because success comes from doing little things right. Success comes from finding excellence in simple things, in simple execution. And sometimes those are the areas which actually are the toughest areas to really master, the simplest of things. But that only comes when you bring joy in effort, and you cultivate an environment which not just rewards outcomes, but also plays and puts a lot of emphasis on the process. And I think that is very important. End of the day, outcomes will only come with people, and on how people collectively are able to be at their best, and that will drive outcomes. And for that to happen, I think you have to show empathy. I think that is something very, very critical in that process, and I think you have to cultivate that environment where people are able to really find that joy in the process, and finally people are really able to immerse themselves into the process of executing, and I think that is something which is sometimes overlooked, but I think that, to me, if I try and find some parallels in business and sport, I think that is something which is very important. I think all great business leaders would also say that for them it is about trying to really master the process, and always trying to get better at the process. You also have to learn that you will never be able to completely master anything, because there will always be changes. There will be external changes in the environment, but also as individuals, we will keep changing. Sometimes what we really do is dehumanize the whole process. And I think that is something which is very important also to always remember, that at the end of the day, we are human beings. And when we always keep human well-being at the heart and center of performance, we will create a culture where we will create more resilient managers or resilient people in organizations. So I think it is a combination of doing a few things. I don't think that resilience can just come by doing one thing. It is about finding a balance in certain aspects. But having adaptability, having acceptance, cultivating an environment which is psychologically safe, which allows people to get out of their comfort zone. That is important. And I think, again, drawing several parallels from sport, I think to be resilient, you always have to have that childlike enthusiasm and childlike energy. And that will only come, from me when I was an athlete. I brought the spirit of work to play. But I think, organizations can also do a great deal and do well in bringing the spirit of play to work, because that will build relationships, that will form camaraderie. And at the end of the day, it is a collective effort. And, a collective effort will make more resilient human beings, because you're there for each other in good times and bad. At the end of the day, it is you have to humanize the whole process. And I think that is, to me, the most critical.
That is so well spoken. And I'm sure, a voice of such conviction and a voice of such clarity on corporate boards would really matter a lot. I understand that you are already on a couple of boards. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm an independent director on Bajaj Auto, and that's been quite fascinating for me to be on there.
Awesome. Abhinav, thanks so much for your insights and for your time today. I think it's been very, very educative for me personally, and I'm sure everyone on this webinar would have benefited from the insights and the acute clarity that you bring to solving some very complex learning problems, and your focus on process rather than on outcomes. I think it's been a very, very enriching and educative conversation. I'd now like to invite Dr. Chaudhary to see if there are any questions from our audience that you may like to address. Thank you so much, Abhinav. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Anish. Thank you, Abhinav. It's been an absolutely great discussion, sort of thing, especially ranging from failure to resilience on the side. And then, as you can expect, there are multiple questions. In fact, we have a lot of questions, in fact. But I must inform all of our participants that Abhinav has a hard stop around 7:05. So therefore, we will try to accommodate as many questions as we can, and let's see how many questions we can accommodate. This is the first question from Neeraj Kumar Abhinav, and his question is how to come out of this habit of procrastination, deferring it always when it matters the most, with all the life constraints. How to be focused on goal? Thank you, Neeraj.
By being answerable to your own self. Before you go to bed, look yourself into the mirror and ask yourself, have you been at your best today? And on days when the answer is yes, and you've given it your all, you'll sleep well. And on the days where you've procrastinated and not been at your best, you'll toss around the whole night. So it'll get you on the right track.
Great. So there are a lot of questions related to failures, Abhinav, but I'm sure you in your address and your chat with Anish, you must have addressed most of it. So let me move on to the next question, which is from Shruti Sonavan. And her question is, good evening, sir. What was the biggest fear you have faced in your Olympic career, and how have you come out of this situation? Thank you, Shruti.
Shooting was a lonely sport. It was a lonely journey. My constant companion in 22 years of my sports career was self-doubt. That was my biggest challenge. I was never able to really overcome it. I learned to coexist with it. I learned to find coping mechanisms. And my biggest coping mechanism was not to go after self-belief, but go after self-respect. And self-respect was born when I was able to give my best and look myself into that mirror, which I really did every night before I went to bed, and ask myself, did I put my best foot forward today? And when those days were more than the days where I hadn't, self-respect was being cultivated. And before I boarded that flight to Beijing, I asked myself that question, have I put in everything in the last 4 years to prepare? And the answer was yes. And even before I shot that first competition shot in that Olympic competition, I'd already won because I had won in my own eyes, and that was powerful.
So it's a great thing. This is a question from Mr. Vijay Babu Abhinav, and his question is: how do you mentally prepare yourself in the critical situations, especially when you had to take decisions at the crucial moments?
Yes, it requires, I think, having flexibility in mindset to me is very, very important, because when you are under pressure, there will be something which pops up, which requires you to be at your alert best and take quick decisions. So you have to, if you're rigid in thought processes, you are not able, you won't find that nimbleness in quick decision making, and probably will end up making the wrong decision. So having adaptability, having acceptance, these are things that you also have to cultivate, because if you are not, if you resist situations when something's thrown at you which you haven't accepted, which you hadn't anticipated, and resist it, and not have the ability to adapt to it, you're not going to be able to be at your best. So cultivate the habit of acceptance, cultivate the habit of adaptability, and make it as a way of life, because when you do that, when you're stuck in your next traffic jam and you're irritated, accept the situation and use that time for something creative, not resist that situation. And slowly, you'll build a mindset, and I think that's important.
Now, this is a question from Mr. Lalit Pradhan Abhinav. His question is: how to find out our true calling? How to be sure the path that we choose is the right path?
I think when you fall in again, when you recognize the fact that you love the process of what you did, I think you've found your calling.
Great. And this is a question from Mr. Ajit Jaiswal Abhinav. His question is: respected sir, everyone requires a coach and a mentor to show the path and develop. How do you find or select one who would groom you to reach your dream destination?
I had several mentors, and I'll maybe answer this question by talking about one mentor who also happened to be my greatest and my fiercest critic. His name was Coach Uwe, probably the only person in my life I hated, because he kept telling me things which I didn't want to hear. But I ended up becoming a good listener. Maybe 95% of the things he told me, I didn't listen, but the 5 things that did stick became the most valuable lessons in my sports career. So when the next time you hear a perspective which doesn't suit you at that moment, don't rubbish it completely. Have the ability to listen and respect another perspective. Who knows, that individual might become your mentor. It certainly happened to me.
This is a question from one of our YouTube participants, Abhinav. His question is: how did you define your success before you won Beijing Olympics and post winning the Olympics?
There was absence of regret. There was no regret in preparation. So that was my success.
And this is a question from Mr. Sham Babu. It is a great opportunity to listen to you. How can we get our kids of age 5 to 10 to your foundation to build a great athlete?
Well, the details are available on our website, so just Google and reach out.
Okay, so maybe with your permission, I'll take 2 more questions as we're approaching the time. Abhinav, this is from Vinod Tarao. I'm sure you've already addressed in your conversation with Anish, but nevertheless, I think his question is: who has been your mentor in your journey or sounding board, if you have someone?
Several people. I mean, of course, family was something which had a massive role to play in my career. But yeah, I think it was, maybe I'll talk about competitors. Sometimes it's difficult to build relationships with competitors. And sometimes I even had those difficulties in building those relationships with my competitors. But what I did have was humility to be able to have the ability to watch them and learn from them. And that was something also quite valuable.
Thank you, Abhinav. This is a question from Ms. Priyanka Khera, and her question is: good evening, sir. Thanks for the great insights. Kids these days want success, but sometimes they don't work that hard for it. How to inculcate those simple self-discipline habits in them so that they achieve their visions?
Sorry, I lost you for a minute, but I think I've got you back now.
Okay, let me repeat. Thanks for the great insights, Abhinav. Kids these days want success, but sometimes they don't work hard for it. How to inculcate those simple self-discipline habits in them so that they achieve their visions?
By rewarding effort and not just rewarding outcomes.
Okay. And maybe with your permission, I'll take the last question, Abhinav, for the evening. This question is from Mr. Sachin K. Have you ever heard a career setback due to ill health? If yes, how have you handled the same?
Several. I had several injuries during my sports career. And I think the most important thing at that point of time is change of goals. You have to change your goal setting. Because, I was injured, for example, 2 years before Beijing. And, that was in the middle of my Olympic cycle. And then, I could have become very frustrated and, become negative about it. But I just changed my goals. My goal suddenly became that I had to become healthy again. So when you face certain challenges which you haven't anticipated in a career in sport, injury, for example, it's about really changing your goal setting, which just allows you to then reorient your energy into something in a very positive way. And then it just helped me at least heal faster and heal better.
Thank you so much, Abhinav. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to host both of you, especially on Saturday evening, and also especially when you had a very tight traveling schedule. Thank you so much from all of us at TimesPro, as well as from all of our participants from TimesPro's Executive Education. Abhinav, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Abhinav. God bless.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Doctor. Thanks to your entire team. And thank you to all the participants.
Thanks.
Have a good weekend. Good night.
Thank you so much.